At my husband's funeral, my daughter-in-law locked me in the laundry room. Only family is allowed, she said, while my own son nodded in agreement. 43 years of marriage, and I was treated like a stranger. I stayed silent. Weeks later, when they tried to steal everything, I revealed the truth. I was the mysterious heir. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never imagined the week of my husband's funeral would end with me locked in the laundry room like an unwanted guest. Yet there I was, 69 years old, my back aching from arthritis, pressed against a thin wooden door while my daughter-in-law's sharp Irish accent sliced through the air outside. Only family participates, Catherine O'Connell Carter had said as she shoved me inside. Evelyn, I don't want you making a scene. The latch clicked, cold and final. 43 years of marriage to Richard Carter, and in that instant I was no longer considered family enough to hear his final wishes. The humiliation burned deeper than the stiffness in my knees. I sat on the little stool Richard used to keep for changing light bulbs, listening as muffled voices filled the house that had been my home for nearly half a century. Michael, my only son, stood with her. His voice carried through the narrow hallway, steady, detached. Mom gets too emotional about these things, he told the lawyer. It's better this way. Too emotional about my husband's death. Too emotional about being cast aside in the very moment when I needed compassion the most. I pressed my palm against the peeling pane of the door, trying to breathe evenly, but my heart pounded when I heard the lawyer's voice pause over the most important words. The primary beneficiary of Richard Carter's estate is designated as papers rustled. Then the revelation came. Storm, the mysterious heir, as specified in the sealed portion of the will. My stomach turned to ice. Mysterious heir? What mysterious heir? In 43 years of marriage, Richard had never kept secrets about money, never hidden family matters from me, unless I had been wrong all along. I strained to hear Catherine's voice. The sharpness in her tone betrayed her panic. When will we know who that is? The identity, the lawyer said carefully, will be revealed according to Mr. Carter's specific timeline and conditions. Until then, the estate remains in trust. Silence followed, broken only by footsteps moving toward the living room. I heard snippets, liquidating assets, small apartment, practical arrangements. My name tossed around like an afterthought, as though I were already gone. When Catherine finally unlocked the door, I was still sitting where she had left me, hands folded in my lap like an obedient child. She didn't apologize. Her pale blue eyes slid past mine, void of guilt. Well, that's settled then, she said briskly. The house and most assets go to the heir once it identified. Until then, we'll manage everything. We? My voice was barely a whisper. Michael stepped forward. For a fleeting moment, I saw the boy who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms, but the warmth was gone from his eyes. They were cold now, calculating. Catherine and I will handle the estate. Mom, you don't need to worry about complicated legal matters. Complicated legal matters. My husband's will, my home, my life. I forced my voice steady. I think I have a right to understand what Richard left for me. Catherine laughed, brittle and cruel. Oh, he left you something all right. A small provision, enough for a nice little apartment in that new senior community downtown. Very practical. Her words struck like a blow. Richard, my Richard, had relegated me to a small provision while leaving everything else to a stranger. I could hardly form the words. I don't understand. It's simple, Catherine said, already turning away. Richard was thinking about the future. Young families need resources more than, she waved a hand dismissively toward me, more than people in your situation. My situation. Widowed, old, unwanted. That night, I sat alone in Richard's armchair, the house cloaked in shadows. My hands clutched the wedding photograph that still sat on the mantel. His smile in that picture was the same one he'd given me just weeks ago when I carried him tea in his workshop. How could that man, the man who had called me his partner, his anchor, have cast me aside in death? Yet beyond the ache of betrayal, a darker thought gnawed at me. Catherine hadn't looked shocked when she learned about the mysterious heir. She had looked prepared, as if she had been waiting for this moment. She had known exactly which lawyers to call, exactly which steps to take. And so the question that would haunt me began to form, sharp as a blade in the quiet night. If Catherine truly hadn't known about the mysterious heir, then why did she seem to know exactly what to do next? The first signs appeared barely a week later. I woke one morning to find strangers trampling through the front garden, their boots sinking into the soil where Richard's roses had bloomed for decades. They carried clipboards, tape measures, and the detached efficiency of people who had no history with the place they were dismantling. Catherine stood on the porch, issuing instructions as though she were mistress of the house. Her pale hair gleamed in the sunlight, her arms crossed with authority that wasn't hers to claim. "What's happening?" I asked, stepping outside in my robe, coffee trembling in my hands. "Estate sale preparation," she answered without turning. "We need to liquidate assets quickly. The mysterious heir clause makes everything complicated, so we're being proactive." That word again, proactive. Catherine's favorite weapon. Every time she used it, my life became smaller. "But this is my home," I said, my voice cracking against the morning air. Michael appeared at her side, hands shoved into his pockets. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Technically, it belongs to the estate now. We're just trying to protect everyone's interests, including yours." The word including stung like a lie. By Thursday, little white tags covered half the furniture. Richard's oak desk, where he had written love notes to me on business trips, bore a sticker like a price slapped on a memory. The dining table we'd bought for our first anniversary was marked for strangers to bargain over. Even my grandmother's china, the set Richard once promised would always be mine, was cataloged with cold precision. "You can't take everything," I whispered as Catherine lifted the lid of my jewelry box. "We're not taking anything, Evelyn. We're preparing for the eventual transfer to the rightful heir." She lifted the pearl necklace Richard had given me on our 20th anniversary and studied it like merchandise. "These might have significant value." "They're mine," I said louder now. "Richard gave them to me." Catherine opened a thick folder and flipped through its pages as if she had rehearsed this moment. "Actually, according to the estate inventory, all jewelry acquired during the marriage is considered marital property, which now belongs to the trust." Her words sliced deeper than the cold metal of the necklace. She had planned this, memorized the language, armed herself with legal terms meant to strip me of everything that tethered me to my life with Richard. That evening, I tried calling my oldest friend, Margaret. The line was dead. When I asked Michael, he said the landline had been disconnected. "Streamlining expenses," he muttered, like it was a reasonable choice. "You can use your cell phone," Catherine offered cheerfully. I didn't own one. Richard and I had never needed one. Within days, I was isolated. No phone, no internet, no car. Michael had taken Richard's truck for safekeeping, and my old sedan was suddenly deemed too costly to repair. The world shrank until the house became both prison and battlefield. On Sunday, I walked to the corner store, my first time in years. Mrs. Alvarez, the owner, looked startled to see me. "Evelyn, I heard about Richard. I'm so sorry." Her voice lowered, careful. "Is it true you're selling everything?" "I'm not selling anything," I said, clutching my grocery bag. "Catherine and Michael are handling the estate." Her expression shifted to pity. "Oh, well, if you need anything..." But her eyes betrayed doubt, as if she wondered whether grief had unhinged me. When I returned, Catherine was showing the house to a young couple with a baby. She introduced me as Richard's widow, who will be moving to a lovely senior community soon. The woman smiled gently. "It must be hard downsizing at your age." I wanted to scream that I wasn't downsizing, that I was being erased, but my throat closed around the words. Who would believe that a son could treat his mother as if she were disposable? That night, lying in bed, I heard their voices in the kitchen below. The old house carried sound too easily. "The appraisers finished the jewelry today," Catherine said, her tone brisk. "More valuable than we thought." "Good," Michael answered. "The sooner we liquidate everything, the better." "What about her?" A pause, then my son's voice, harder than I'd ever heard it. "She'll adjust. She always does." She'll adjust, as though I were furniture being relocated, not a human being grieving the loss of her husband. The mysterious heir had become a convenient excuse, a mask they wore to justify dismantling my life. Yet the more I listened, the more something gnawed at me. Catherine had known exactly which lawyers to call, which accounts to freeze, which procedures to follow. She moved too quickly, too confidently, and I began to wonder in the silence of my room whether Richard had known something long before I did. It began with the sound of metal scattering across concrete. I had been cleaning Richard's workshop, one of the last corners Catherine hadn't yet invaded, when his old toolbox toppled from the shelf. Bolts and screws clattered across the floor, and among them slid a manila envelope marked in Richard's careful handwriting. For Evelyn. Open only if something happens to me. My knees gave way, and I sank to the floor, trembling as though the air itself had thickened around me. For a long moment, I could only stare at the words. Richard's handwriting, steady, deliberate, was unmistakable. My Richard, who had never left me a note longer than a grocery list, had left behind a sealed message meant for the day he no longer lived. With shaking hands, I tore the flap open. Inside was a business card and a single folded page. The card read, Jonathan Blake, estate planning attorney. The note was brief, but it cleaved my world in two. Evelyn, if you're writing this, ask Jonathan about the Sunflower Trust. You are not what they'll tell you that you are. I made sure of that. All my love, or the words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Sunflower. Richard used to call me his sunflower because he said I always turned toward the light. The pet name now returned like a lifeline in the dark. What had he meant? Why the secrecy? Why hadn't he told me when we still had evenings together, when he sat in this very workshop with the smell of sawdust clinging to his clothes? I pressed the note against my chest. For the first time in weeks, hope stirred, a fragile, flickering flame against the smothering weight of Catherine's control. When I returned to the house, the voices carried from the kitchen, Catherine's lilting Irish accent, sharp now as she barked into the phone. The buyers want to close by next month. We need to finalize everything before complications arise. Complications. Was I the complication? That night, I lay awake, clutching the envelope beneath my pillow, listening to the creaks of the house. Every sound made me startle. Every whisper from down the hall carried menace. Catherine and Michael thought they had stripped me of everything, my home, my dignity, my independence. But they didn't know about Richard's secret. They didn't know about the Sunflower Trust. The next morning I dressed carefully, the envelope tucked into my coat pocket. I'm walking to the store, I told them over breakfast. Neither of them looked up. It was the first gift they had given me in weeks. Invisibility. 12 blocks later, I reached an old payphone beside the shuttered drugstore. My fingers fumbled with the coins, stiff from arthritis. But finally, the line rang through. Blake Law Office, a receptionist answered. This is Evelyn Carter, I stammered. I believe my husband Richard was your client. Silence, and then a calm male voice replaced hers. Mrs. Carter, I've been wondering when you'd call. Can you come in today? An hour later, I sat in Jonathan Blake's small office, sunlight spilling across stacks of files and leather-bound books. He was younger than I expected, maybe 50, with eyes that held the kind of patience born from listening to people at their most desperate. Richard came to see me 8 months ago, Jonathan said gently, hands folded on the desk. He was very specific about his instructions. He believed his family might try to complicate things for you after his passing. Complicate. Richard had known. Jonathan reached into his cabinet and drew out a thick folder, placing it before me. He created something called the Sunflower Trust. It supersedes the will that was read in your home. You, Mrs. Carter, are the mysterious heir. The room tilted around me. I don't understand. The Sunflower Trust makes you the primary beneficiary of Richard's estate, Jonathan explained. The house, the savings, the investments, they are all yours. The will that Catherine and Michael heard was a decoy, designed to protect the trust until the time was right. Richard wanted to see how they behaved without oversight. My hands shook as I pressed the note flat against the desk. But Catherine said Richard left me only a small provision. She was never meant to know the truth. That provision was part of the ruse. Jonathan's voice hardened. Richard told me he feared your daughter-in-law's influence over your son. He wanted to make sure you were safe. And the floor seemed to vanish beneath me. For weeks I had been humiliated. cornered, stripped of my place in the world. And all along, Richard had shielded me from the shadows they cast. Have they asked you to sign anything? Jonathan's question cut through the haze. Yes, I whispered. Guardianship papers. Catherine said they were precautionary in case I needed help making decisions. Jonathan's face blanched. If you had signed those, they could have taken control of your finances, your medical choices, even forced you into a facility. Richard specifically warned me about this possibility. I closed my eyes as the truth sank in. Catherine hadn't just tried to steal my inheritance. She had been plotting to steal me. When I opened them again, Jonathan's voice was steady. Mrs. Carter, it's time they learn exactly who the mysterious heir is. I nodded, but as I walked home that afternoon, clutching the envelope inside my coat, the words replayed in my mind. Richard had known 8 months ago. He had planned every step. But if Catherine had been preparing for just as long, what else was she hiding? The game was only beginning. And if you're listening to my story now, stay with me, because what came next would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. The city seemed strangely distant as I walked back from Jonathan Blake's office, his words echoing louder than the traffic around me. I was the mysterious heir. The Sunflower Trust gave me everything Richard had worked his whole life to build. Everything Catherine believed she already controlled. The weight of that truth pressed against me with each step, and yet beneath it flickered something fierce. Hope. When I reached the house, Catherine was at the kitchen counter, speaking rapidly in Irish on the phone. Her voice carried an edge, a frantic urgency she hadn't bothered to conceal. The moment she saw me, she switched to English. The buyers want to close by next month, she said into the receiver. We need to finalize everything before complications arise. Her eyes flicked toward me, cold and appraising. I understood then that the complication was me. I tightened my grip on the envelope in my pocket and walked upstairs without a word. That night, I lay awake in Richard's side of the bed, the note he had left for me resting on the nightstand. His handwriting seemed to glow in the dim light, a message from beyond urging me to stand tall. The following morning, Catherine and Michael joined me at the table for breakfast. Catherine's composure was flawless. Her hair pinned neatly, her lips painted a confident red. She slid a stack of papers across the table as though delivering a gift. The estate situation has become more complicated than expected, she said smoothly. These documents will ensure you have immediate access to your inheritance. Regardless of delays with the mysterious heir clause, you'll be protected. Michael nodded, avoiding my gaze. It's just to make sure you're taken care of, Mom. I looked down at the papers. The words blurred at first, dense legal jargon meant to confuse, but enough of it pierced through. Transfer of decision-making authority, incapacity provisions, financial guardianship. My hand trembled as I touched the edge of the page. This says you want control of my money, I said quietly. This says we want to protect your money, Catherine corrected, her smile as sharp as glass. From legal complications you wouldn't understand. Something in me snapped. Perhaps it was Richard's steady voice in the back of my mind. Perhaps it was the weeks of humiliation, of being dismissed, cut off, treated as less than human. My own voice surprised me with its steadiness. I understand more than you think, I said, pushing the papers back across the table. I understand you've been planning this for months. I understand you locked me in the laundry room so I wouldn't hear what was really in Richard's will. And I understand that you're lying to me. Michael's face drained of color. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. I rose from my chair, the strength in my legs fueled by something more powerful than defiance. I know about the Sunflower Trust. The silence that followed felt like thunder in the room. Catherine's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Michael's mouth fell open, his denial caught in his throat. I don't know what you're talking about, Catherine said at last, but her Irish accent thickened, betraying her nerves. Richard created the trust 8 months ago. It makes me the primary beneficiary of his entire estate. It makes me the mysterious heir. Michael shot to his feet so quickly his chair toppled. That's impossible. Is it? My voice softened, laced with sorrow. Richard knew, Michael. He heard the two of you discussing senior communities. liquidating assets and pushing me aside. He created the trust to protect me from you. The mask Catherine wore cracked. Fury twisted her face. You manipulative old woman. You think you can just walk in and claim everything? I'm not claiming anything, I answered calmly. It was mine all along. Catherine slammed her hand against the table. We've been managing this estate for weeks. We've invested time, money, and effort into protecting these assets. For yourselves, I said. Michael stepped between us, his voice rising. Mom, stop. You're being ridiculous. Dad would never have kept something like this from us. He kept it from me too, I whispered, the ache in my chest almost unbearable. Because he knew I would need protection from my own family. The words hung between us like a curse. Michael flinched, and for the first time I saw the cracks in his certainty. But Catherine, unwilling to surrender, lunged for her purse and pulled out her phone. I'm calling our lawyer. This is fraud. She's delusional, inventing trusts that don't exist. Call him, I said. My voice did not tremble. Better yet, call Jonathan Blake. He's Richard's real attorney. The blood drained from their faces. All their careful scheming, all their manipulation, every cold dismissal. They had built their confidence on sand, and now the tide was coming in. You don't understand, Catherine said, her voice breaking into desperation. We need this money. Michael's business is failing. We have debts. We have obligations. That isn't my burden, I said, my heart splintering as I looked at my son. The boy I raised died the day he locked me in that laundry room. What stands before me now is a stranger who shares my blood, but not my love. Michael's face crumpled, anguish carving into his features. Mom, please, we can fix this. We can be a family again. I shook my head. No, some things can't be fixed. I turned toward the door, leaving them frozen in silence. Catherine's final words followed me like a curse. If you do this, you'll lose Michael forever. You'll die alone with no family, no one to care for you. I paused, hand on the door frame, and looked back one last time. My voice was quiet but sure. I've been alone for years. I just didn't realize it until now. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and for the first time in weeks, I could breathe again. The moment I told him I knew the truth, silence fell like a blade through the room. Catherine's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips, her knuckles whitening against the porcelain. Michael's face drained of color, his mouth opening but no words escaping. It was as if my voice had broken the careful illusion they had built, shattering weeks of control in a single breath. I know about the Sunflower Trust, I said again, steady, deliberate. My voice no longer wavered, no longer begged to be heard. It cut through the morning air like steel. Catherine was the first to recover. Her accent thickened, each word dripping with contempt. You manipulative old woman, you think you can just claim everything because of some fairy tale about a trust? I'm not claiming anything, I replied, sliding Richard's note across the table. It was mine all along. Michael shoved his chair back, the legs scraping against the tile with a shriek. That's not possible. Dad would never have hidden something like this from us. He hid it from me too, I answered softly, because he knew I would need protection. Protection from both of you. The truth settled heavy between us, suffocating the room. I saw Michael flinch as if the words had struck him, but Catherine's composure finally cracked into fury. We've been managing this estate for weeks, she shouted, her voice trembling. We've handled the lawyers, the accounts, the sales. We've invested our time, our money, our energy into protecting what Richard left behind. Protecting it for yourselves, I said, rising from my chair. Her pale eyes glittered with rage. You ungrateful hag. Do you think anyone will believe you? We've already told the neighbors you're fragile, confused, showing signs of dementia. My heart clenched. The fatigue, the fog in my mind, the way I had begun to question myself, it all made sense. You've been poisoning me, I whispered. Catherine's smile twisted into something cruel. Just mild sedatives, nothing dangerous, enough to make you seem weak, unreliable, enough to prepare the perfect case for guardianship. Michael turned to her, horror flashing in his eyes. You did what? She ignored him, her gaze locked on me, her words like venom. You were never supposed to know. Richard tested me, told me about this mysterious heir just before he died to see if I would still care for you. He thought I'd protect you out of the goodness of my heart. But why would I waste my life on someone who's already lived hers? The cruelty of it stole my breath. For weeks I had believed grief and age were crushing me. Instead, it had been Catherine's hand, her deliberate attempt to erase me from my own life. Michael staggered back as if struck. Sarah, he caught himself, shaking his head. Catherine, tell me you didn't. She turned on him, vicious now. Don't act like you weren't part of it. You wanted this as much as I did. You knew your business was failing. You knew we needed money. You knew she was in the way. I thought, his voice cracked. I thought we were helping Mom transition, not destroying her. Tears blurred my vision, but my voice cut through their chaos. Richard saw you. He wrote everything down. He knew what you were planning, Catherine. He warned Jonathan Blake, and now the truth is out. And for the first time since Richard's death, I felt power return to me. I was no longer the woman locked in the laundry room, silenced, dismissed. I was Richard's wife, the rightful heir, the survivor of betrayal. Catherine lunged for her phone, her desperation unraveling her poise. I'll call the lawyer. I'll prove this trust doesn't exist. Then call Jonathan Blake, I said calmly. He's the one holding Richard's file. He's the one who will confirm every word. Her hand froze midair. Her eyes widened, the fury replaced by the dawning terror of someone who realizes the game is lost. Michael sank into a chair, his hands covering his face. Oh God, what have we done? I stood at the doorway, the morning light spilling across the floor behind me. You tried to steal my inheritance. You tried to steal my independence, but you underestimated me. You thought I would remain silent. You thought wrong. Catherine's voice broke into a scream. If you do this, you'll lose Michael forever. You'll die alone with no family left. I looked at my son, his shoulders bent, his silence complicit. I've already lost him. Yeah, you all lost him, I said, but you made sure of that. The air in the room was suffocating, heavy with truth that could no longer be buried. For the first time in weeks, I walked out of the house with my head held high. I had faced them and spoken the truth aloud. And I would not stop now. If you've been following my story, keep listening, because what Catherine did next went far beyond greed. It crossed into something darker, something that could have ended my life if I hadn't uncovered Richard's final gift. Don't miss what comes next. Jonathan Blake's office felt like a sanctuary. Its quiet order, a stark contrast to the chaos of my home. Heavy books lined the walls, their spines dark with age, and sunlight spilled through the bunches in pale stripes across his desk. I sat across from him, trembling as he examined the papers Catherine had tried to force upon me. His expression grew darker with each page. If you had signed these, he said at last, voice low and steady, they would have gained full guardianship rights, complete control of your finances, your medical decisions, even where you lived. They could have committed you to a facility against your will. The teacup in my hands rattled against its saucer. How is that even legal? It's not when it's obtained through deception, Jonathan replied. This constitutes elder abuse and attempted fraud. He set the papers aside, his gaze firm. The question now is, what do you want to do about it? Before I could answer, his secretary tapped on the door. Mr. Blake, there's a Mrs. Catherine Carter here. She insists it's urgent. Jonathan's eyebrows lifted. Send her in. This should be interesting. The door swung open and Catherine stormed in like a force of fury barely contained. Her hair was disheveled, her lipstick smeared, and behind her trailed Michael, shoulders slumped as though the weight of his choices had finally broken him. You can't do this, Catherine hissed, pointing a shaking finger at me. She's manipulating you. She's old, confused. Richard never would have cut out his own son. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, unshaken. On the contrary, Mrs. Carter, Richard was very clear. He documented his concerns about your behavior toward his wife. Her face blanched. What concerns? Jonathan opened Richard's file. Let me read you something in his own handwriting. Catherine has been pressuring Michael to put Evelyn in a home. She's been researching my financial assets, asking questions about my will. I'm afraid she plans to isolate Evelyn and seize control of our estate once I'm gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. Michael's head jerked toward his wife, horror dawning in his eyes. For the first time in years, I saw shame flicker across his face. "That's not true," Catherine whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Jonathan continued, his tone even. Richard also documented conversations he overheard. One in particular stands out. The old woman won't live forever. When she's gone, we'll inherit everything anyway. We just need to speed up the process. Michael recoiled as though struck. "Catherine, tell me you didn't say that." She looked cornered, desperate. "You don't understand. We have debts. Your business is failing. We needed options." "You needed my mother to die?" Michael's voice cracked, breaking on the words. "I never said that," Catherine snapped, her composure unraveling. But Jonathan's calm voice cut through her denial. "You spoke of speeding up the process. What process, Mrs. Carter?" Her mask fell away completely then. "You want to know?" Her voice rose to a shrill pitch. "I've been slipping sleeping pills into her evening tea for weeks, making her seem confused, fragile. I've been telling neighbors she's showing signs of dementia. I've been building the perfect case for incompetency." The room spun around me. The fog I'd been living under, the exhaustion, the way I'd begun to doubt myself. It hadn't been grief or age. It had been poison. "You've been drugging me," I whispered. "Just mild sedatives," she said, almost dismissive. "Nothing that would really hurt you." Jonathan's face hardened as he reached for his phone. "This is criminal assault. I'm calling the police." "Wait," I said, my voice trembling, yet clear. I turned my gaze on Catherine, locking eyes with the woman who had tried to erase me. "One thing before you go. The mysterious heir clause. You knew about it, didn't you?" Her silence told me everything. "Richard told you," I continued softly. "He wanted to see what you'd do if you thought someone else was inheriting everything. He tested you." Catherine's laugh was bitter, broken. "He called me into his workshop a week before he died. Told me he'd changed his will, that there was a mysterious heir. He wanted to see if I'd take care of you out of love. Instead, I chose practicality." "Practicality?" My voice rose with fury. "You tried to steal my life." "You're nothing," she spat. "A pathetic old woman who wasted her years playing house while real people built real futures." Her venomous words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and suffocating. Even Michael stared at her in horror, as though he had never truly seen the woman he married until this moment. "Jonathan," I said calmly, "please call the police. I want to press charges for elder abuse, attempted fraud, and assault." Catherine lunged toward me then, but Jonathan stepped between us, phone already pressed to his ear. "Mrs. Carter, I strongly advise you to leave now and contact your own attorney." Michael's voice was broken when he turned to me. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know she was—" "Yes, you did," I said, the truth heavy in my chest. "Maybe not all of it, but you knew enough. You knew she hated me. You knew I was being treated badly, and you chose her anyway." Tears streamed down his face. "Can we fix this? Can we start over?" I rose to my feet, stronger now than I had been in months. The fog was lifting, replaced by clarity. "Some betrayals," I said quietly, "are too deep to repair." Sirens wailed outside, growing louder with each passing second, and for the first time in weeks, I felt safe. Sometimes betrayal cuts deeper than death. I realized that as I stood in Jonathan Blake's office, the sirens wailing closer, their echo carrying the weight of finality. Catherine sat rigid in her chair, eyes wild, lips pressed into a thin line of venom. Michael looked as though his entire world had collapsed, his face buried in his hands. The door burst open and uniformed officers entered with measured steps. Jonathan handed them the guardianship papers, Richard's notes, the confession Catherine had spewed out in her arrogance. It was enough to bind her to every crime she had tried to conceal. "You can't do this," she snarled, rising to her feet. "She's lying. She's confused. Richard never would have left everything to her. I am the one who kept this family together. I am the one who deserves it." "Mrs. Carter," Jonathan said firmly, You admitted to drugging your mother-in-law. You admitted to conspiring to take control of her estate. Your words alone are enough to destroy every defense you could muster." The officers stepped forward. Catherine resisted, clawing at the edge of the desk as they pulled her arms behind her back. "Michael, say something. Don't just sit there. Help me." My son lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot, his face gray with shame. For a long moment he looked at her, then at me. His lips parted, but no words came. He dropped his gaze back to the floor. "Michael!" she screamed again, as if his silence was the greatest betrayal of all. But the officers were already leading her out the door, her voice echoing down the hall like a curse. The room fell into stillness, the kind of silence that makes the air itself feel heavy. Michael stood slowly, his legs unsteady, and faced me. "Mom," his voice broke. "I didn't know she'd gone that far. I thought we were just protecting the estate. I thought it was for the good of the family." I looked at him, my only child, the boy I had raised with lullabies and forgiveness, the man who had become a stranger under the shadow of his wife. My heart ached with love and sorrow twisted together. "You knew enough," I said softly. "You knew she despised me. You knew she wanted me gone, and you stood by her." Tears slid down his cheeks. "Can't we fix this? Please. I can change. I can make it right. We can be a family again." The words pierced me, but they no longer held the power they once had. "Some things can't be fixed, Michael. Some betrayals carved too deep. When you locked me in that laundry room, when you let her strip my life away, I lost you. The son I loved is gone. What stands before me now is only a man who looks like him." He crumpled, shoulders shaking with sobs. Jonathan said nothing, giving us the dignity of silence, though his presence anchored me like a steady hand at my back. I turned toward the door. My feet felt lighter than they had in weeks, as if each step carried me farther from the weight of their lies. "Mom," Michael cried, his voice raw, "please don't walk away. If you leave now, you'll never come back." I paused at the threshold. For a heartbeat, I let myself remember the child who once clung to me during thunderstorms, the boy who apologized for broken toys, the son who kissed my cheek at Christmas. Then the memory dissolved into the man who let his wife drug me, who stood silent as she tried to erase me. "I've been gone for a long time already," I whispered. "I just didn't see it until now." The hallway stretched before me like a path into freedom. The officers passed by with Catherine in their custody, her eyes blazing as she hissed, "You'll regret this. You'll die alone with no one left to care." I didn't stop walking. Her words no longer carried power. Alone was better than prisoned. Alone was better than betrayed. Outside, the air was cool, scented with rain on the horizon. For the first time in weeks, I filled my lungs with it and felt unshackled. Richard's foresight had not only saved me, it had shown me who truly stood beside me and who never would again. The Sunflower Trust had given me more than property. It had given me truth. And truth, no matter how devastating, is the only ground on which freedom can grow. If you're still with me in this story, don't turn away now. What happened after Catherine's arrest would reshape not only my future, but the way I learned to live again. Keep listening, because the end of betrayal was only the beginning of my rebirth. 6 months had passed since the sirens carried Catherine away, and the house felt like an entirely different place. The walls no longer echoed with whispers meant to undermine me. The furniture, once tagged and threatened with removal, remained where Richard and I had chosen it decades ago. Each room breathed again, filled not with dread, but with peace. I spent that morning in the garden, where Richard's sunflowers had begun to bloom for the first time since his death. Their golden heads swayed toward the sky, defiant against the wind, living symbols of what he had left behind for me. I sat with a cup of tea, watching their steady turn toward the light, and felt the strength he had always believed I carried. Catherine had accepted a plea deal to avoid trial. The charges of elder abuse, attempted fraud, and assault were heavy enough that she would live with the consequences for years to come. Michael had filed for divorce soon after her arrest. He came to see me once, broken and ashamed, begging for forgiveness. I gave it to him, not for his sake, but for mine. Forgiveness lightened the heart, but I made it clear forgiveness did not mean reconciliation. Some bridges burned so completely that to rebuild them would require tearing down everything that came after. I had built a new life instead. The sunflower trust, carefully crafted by Richard, ensured I had financial security. Jonathan Blake guided me through every clause, every safeguard, revealing just how clever my husband had been. Richard had not only protected my inheritance, he had protected my dignity, my autonomy, my right to live on my own terms. In Richard's workshop, I discovered his journal hidden behind a row of tools. Page after page documented Catherine's attempts to isolate me, the subtle manipulations he had overheard, the concern etched into his every word. Yet the final entry undid me. Written just days before he died, it read, "Evelyn doesn't know how strong she is. She spent 43 years being my partner, caring for everyone else, always putting herself last. If something happens to me, she'll discover she has been a warrior all along. The Sunflower Trust will give her the means, but she will provide the courage. I have no doubt she will bloom again." I pressed the journal against my chest and wept, not from sorrow, but from recognition. He had seen in me what I was only now beginning to see in myself. The community had changed around me too. Mrs. Alvarez from the corner store came one afternoon carrying a dish of empanadas. She apologized for doubting me during those weeks when Catherine had tried to paint me as frail and confused. "I should have trusted what I saw in your eyes," she said. "But I thought family matters were not my place. I was wrong." I invited her in for tea and she stayed for hours, telling me stories of her own struggles, her own battles to find her voice. By the time she left, I realized I had gained not just vindication, but a friend. The invitations followed soon after. Neighbors I had barely spoken to in years reached out with kindness. The local book club asked me to join. The community garden wanted me to help teach sunflower cultivation. People no longer saw me as a fragile widow or a burden to be shuffled aside. They saw me as a woman who had endured and prevailed. That shift transformed more than their perception. It transformed my own. I began to treat myself differently. I enrolled in art classes at the community center, something I had always longed to do. I joined a group that traveled to museums and historical sites, each trip reminding me that discovery had no age limit. I even booked a cruise for the spring, a dream Richard and I had spoken of but never realized. Every decision was mine. Every day was mine. A letter arrived from Michael not long ago. He wrote that he was in therapy, working to understand how he had allowed himself to be manipulated into betraying his own mother. He had taken a job in another state, starting over. He did not ask for money, nor did he ask to see me. He only wanted me to know he was trying to change. I read the letter twice before filing it away. Perhaps one day we might find some measure of relationship again. Perhaps not. My happiness no longer depended on his choices. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with gold, I watered Richard's sunflowers. The blossoms bent slightly under the stream, then lifted again, resilient as ever. In their strength, I saw my own. Catherine had tried to strip me of everything, my dignity, my independence, my future. But Richard's final gift had not been the trust itself. It was the revelation of my own worth, my own right to live freely and fully, no longer defined by anyone else's shadow. The house, the garden, the life, all of it was mine again. And for the first time in years, when I looked ahead, I saw not loss, but possibility. Evening sunlight spilled across the garden, setting Richard's sunflowers aglow in golden fire. Their tall stalks stood steady in the breeze, their faces turned to the dying light as though they had never known darkness. I stood among them, the soil soft beneath my feet, and felt the quiet strength of the life I had rebuilt. For months I had lived beneath the weight of betrayal, humiliation, and fear. Catherine had tried to drug me, silence me, erase me from my own home. Michael had chosen to stand beside her instead of me, his silence wounding more than words ever could. Yet Richard, even in death, had placed a shield in my hands. The Sunflower Trust was more than a legal safeguard. It was his last love letter, a gift that proved he had believed in me even when I doubted myself. I thought back to the final entry in his journal, the one I had read until the ink seemed burned into my memory. She will discover she has been a warrior all along. At first, I had dismissed it as the wishful thinking of a husband wanting to comfort himself near the end. But standing there, I understood. He hadn't been imagining strength in me, I had simply failed to see it myself. Neighbors greeted me differently now. When I walked to the store, heads lifted, smiles met mine, respect softened their voices. I was no longer the woman whispered about as fragile or fading. I was the woman who had fought back and won. And more than victory, I had found freedom. I began to notice changes in the smallest details. The way I walked, shoulders straighter, steps lighter. The way I spoke, no longer hesitating, no longer shrinking to make others comfortable. For years I had let Richard's presence shield me, and when he was gone, I thought I would crumble without it. But losing him revealed that he had already given me everything I needed. One afternoon, Mrs. Alvarez stopped by again, bringing fresh bread warm from her oven. She stayed for tea, and we laughed about the awkwardness of first friendships at our age, about learning that strength often comes disguised as survival. When she left, I realized I hadn't just gained peace, I had gained community. The book club meetings filled my evenings with stories and conversation. Art classes stained my fingers with paint, colors blooming on canvas as though some part of me had waited decades to be seen. Plans for the cruise in spring sat pinned on the kitchen corkboard, a reminder that the future was mine to choose. And though the ache of loss remained, it no longer hollowed me. It shaped me. Grief was not absence. It was proof of love. Betrayal was not weakness. It was proof that I could endure and still stand. Michael's letter lay folded in my desk drawer. I had read it 3 times before tucking it away, not ready to decide what place he might have in my life again. He was trying to change, but change was not a request for forgiveness, nor was it a demand for reconciliation. It was his journey now. Mine had already begun, and it no longer revolved around the choices of others. That night, as the sun sank fully beyond the horizon, I sat at the garden's edge with the sky painted in violet and gold. The sunflowers bowed their heavy heads, but still pointed west, faithful to the light even as it disappeared. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. At 69, I had learned the lesson that had eluded me all my life. The only approval I had ever truly needed was my own. Richard's final gift had not been the house, the accounts, or even the trust itself. His gift had been the truth that I was capable of standing alone, of surviving storms, of blooming again in the wake of ruin. I touched the petals of a sunflower, its surface rough and alive beneath my fingertips. "I'm all right, Richard," I whispered to the night. "I'm more than all right. I'm finally myself." And as the breeze carried the scent of earth and blossoms through the air, I knew I had turned fully toward the light. If my story has reached you, let it remind you that strength is not discovered in ease, but in the moments when everything seems lost. If you've endured betrayal, if you've been underestimated or silenced, know this: you carry more power than you realize. Share this story so others may find their strength too, and never forget, you can bloom again.